Hey everybody, welcome to the Quality of Life Prescription. I'm Dr. Neela Sandel. I'm joined by Drs. Dan Horzempa and Shannon Bybee Driscoll. This podcast is oriented to folks who are interested in integrative medicine, functional medicine, and how to improve the quality and span of your life.
Hi, everyone. So at the Quality of Life Prescription, we get questions from our patients all the time. And so what we're looking to do, one of many things we're looking to do here is to really start to address those questions in the podcast. So all of the questions that you'll hear today, topics that are brought up, were patient generated. And so this will be hopefully a benefit for our patients and anyone else listening.
Yeah, so our first question is weight loss. Comes every time. How do we lose weight? What are the tips, tricks, and what are the myths?
Well, let's put things in perspective first. So 70% of U.S. adults roughly overweight or obese. So we're talking about the majority of the population.
That's an amazing number.
Yeah. So, it's a problem that most people are going to have on some level, or will be at least thinking about, concerned about. And I think there are a lot of myths out there. What are some of the myths that you guys hear, especially from patients coming in to see you?
I would say one of the biggest ones I hear, one of the ones that concerns me the most is it's got to be low calorie. So I'm seeing people who are coming in who have tried maybe the HCG diet or diet of whatever, and they're only consuming 500 to 1,000 calories a day.
So painful caloric reductions rather than little more moderate caloric reductions.
Yeah, which I think initially is very effective. But in the long term, I think it can be very detrimental.
Yeah.
One of the things that's unique about the integrative medicine approach is that we spend a lot of time thinking about the nuance in things, right? And that mythology that you're describing comes from a lack of nuance, right? It's this idea that it's just calories in and calories out, and that should do it. But that misses all of the other adaptability of the human biology. And so then we end up getting to this place and people go, well, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. And so then they'll throw out the baby with the bathwater. And they'll say, well, no, it's not calories in, calories out at all. That just doesn't make sense. I've tried that. And it's like, okay, well, hang on. We have to expand this topic a little bit so that we can actually get something useful and functional for you.
Yeah. Well, I think we get two camps. We get a camp, it's all about caloric reduction. Quality of food, quality of the foods you're consuming, even the macros matters a lot less. And then you have another camp that says, well, calories are not even really important here. It's more about quality of food and maybe looking at protein, carbs, and fat and how those are, arranged and oriented. And, the reality is, yeah, calories do matter, but so does the quality of the food, right? Because these things are it's not a static system. And the quality of the food can have an interaction with the output. I'm thinking like thermic effect of food, like certain foods, you will burn more calories to actually metabolize, right? And certainly, if you're looking just at hunger control, appetite regulation, certainly, 100 calories of broccoli is going to control your appetite in a very different way than
100 calories of fat.
Yeah. Yeah, or 100 calories of like a candy bar or something, which is going to be a pretty small candy bar, versus 100 calories of broccoli is going to be probably a cup or two or more of broccoli. So,
Shannon, how often do you come across this question in your patients?
Well, I see a lot of women in my practice, and it seems to be one of their primary concerns when they come in. I want to lose weight, or I've been trying to lose weight for the last year and I haven't lost anything. So I would say it's a 95% of the population comes in and says, help me, I want to lose weight.
Yeah, that's a big number. Yeah. And what is your sense in your practice of why that's women predominant?
Well, part of it, I think, is timing of life. I do see a good number of women who are 40 plus in age, and so hormones are playing a big role. So they're in that huge swing of hormonal changes, and that unfortunately does make a change around the waistline that they're not used to. So they're saying, like, I'm eating the same, I'm exercising the same, everything's the same, but I am putting on weight, and it feels like I'm putting on pounds per week.
It's a big part of that nuance, right? I think patients are very tired of hearing mainstream MD answers around weight loss. I mean, now there's this whole Wegovy concept, and finally mainstream MDs have some success with this. But I think for a long time, people knew intuitively and experientially that the advice they were getting didn't really make sense, right? Like, what about the hormones? Why is this happening to women who are nearing menopause or having hormonal changes? It just goes back to this concept that this is a really nuanced thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece of the puzzle I commonly see is, there's so much toxic load in people. So it's more than just the food, but the plastics and the environmental exposures, the heavy metals, the chronic diseases, all of that stuff plays a role too. And until we can kind of cleanse it and move it out, that weight isn't going anywhere because it's a protective mechanism. The body's using that fat to protect you from the toxins or whatever it is that's kind of lingering inside.
Yeah. Dan, do you talk a little bit more about the protective effect of that fat? Because that's a really fascinating concept, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing certainly is that metabolism, it changes, right? So it not only changes over the lifespan, but you can actually force change on your metabolism when you do, like Shannon has talked about, 500 calories a day, 1,000 calories a day for a prolonged period of time. You're going to burn less. Your metabolism is going to become more efficient, and you're going to burn less calories. And then say you go back to your 2,000 calorie a day diet, and that delta between how much you burn and how much you're eating is even bigger.
That change, you mean by delta? Yeah.
Yeah, that change.
It's amazing how adaptive the human body is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and of course, there's studies that have looked at people somebody who's been, say, 180 pounds their whole life, weight hasn't fluctuated much. Somebody who was, say, 300, and lost weight down to 180. And the metabolism between those two individuals is pretty different. That person who has lost all that weight is going to burn a lot less calories because their metabolism this is where we get into this concept of like the body weight set point. Like your body's always trying to get back to where this set point is. And it seems to be, it's a lot easier to drive up that set point than it is to bring it down. So
when you say drive up that set point, you mean get to a place where your body expects to be heavier? That's correct. Easier? Yeah.
Yeah. So as you're gaining weight, you're driving up that set point. As you lose weight, you may not lower it though. So the body may be trying to get back to that state. And one of the adaptations there is to kind of lower metabolism, lower metabolic output. So you're just going to be burning less calories than that person who's kind of always been at that stable weight.
Extra fat tissue certainly is a modern scourge, but the reason that it's so problematic right now is that our adaptive environment has changed from 200, 500 years ago, right? We used to exist in this environment, or our ancestors more appropriately did, where you really wanted to be able to be adaptive and not lose calories, right? Because calories weren't available as readily as they were now. You might hit a hard winter and, you would be well served by having had a higher set point, holding more of that fuel in reserve. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating that, nowadays, because our environment has changed, we're having a completely different effect from that adaptive mechanism. What used to serve us now is causing a lot of havoc for people.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, I think, the thrifty gene hypothesis, I guess is the term of this. It's pretty controversial. It's basically what you're describing. Certainly somebody who could, survive periods of time of minimal to no food, is going to have a lot of these same metabolic adaptations. So
we're primed for a winter of famine that just never comes.
Yeah. Just forget about it. Just go to the superstore, supermarket, just grab something. You're cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other part of this equation, though, that general public gets told is we've heard about eat less. That's what we've been talking about. But it's also move more. Eat less, move more. What do you guys think about that?
It's almost a fighting battle, right? You move more, you're burning more calories. The body's going to say, I'm hungry. You got to feed me.
Appetite. Yeah.
So that those hunger cues are going to come on stronger than before you were moving. Now I'm not going to say don't exercise, because there are tons of benefits with exercise, but we don't want to have your mechanism for weight loss be based solely on exercise, because it's going to be a losing battle. Yeah. Like, in fact, The Biggest Loser was a great example of that. They fed them less, they exercised them more, they lost tons of weight. And what happened? You go back and look at these guys 9 months later, a year and a half later, they put on more weight than when they started with. Yeah. It was a mechanism that was doomed for failure.
Yeah. So it goes back to that set point theory, huh? They hadn't fundamentally altered their set point. So once you remove those interventions, they just fall back into their set point.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they're starving, they're hungry, and they just you can't fight that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is important for the prescriptives of how you do recommend exercise. Because I'm sure we're kind of talking about the essence of the problem now, but as we start to talk about solutions, I think the common thing that's seen, you go to the gym, you see this cardio side, people are just kind of slaving cardio machines. Not that there's not value there, but again, that's going to drive up appetite, not going to do much for muscle mass, which is actually the part of your body that's burning calories. And so the prescriptives that we may recommend, or certainly I know I do in practice, are a bit different and more centered around maybe more high intensity interval type stuff, more strength type stuff, really trying to avoid those prolonged cardiovascular training sessions that are really going to drive up appetite.
So let's get into that quality of life prescription.
Yeah.
What do you guys do when a patient comes to you and they say, hey, I need to lose weight? Shannon, 95% of your patients, and they're coming in saying, things are just, it isn't working for me. I'm missing something. Help me out, doc.
Yeah. So my general prescription is you have to eat real food. You have to eat vegetables. You have to eat protein. You have to eat fruit. You've got to drink plenty of water. That's the basics. If you can cut out processed foods, sugars, processed oils, you're going to get ahead by leaps and bounds. And just eating real food. It has so many benefits.
And you're saying it quickly, but that's a tall order, right? Cutting out sugar, increasing water, cutting out processed foods. I mean, it's quick to say, but because eating is such a cultural thing, an ingrained thing, a learned thing, it's very difficult for people to fundamentally modify that for themselves. So how do you help people do just those basic things? How do you help them sink into that, link up with that?
Yeah, so now we're going to be talking about what is real food. And we're going to have to talk about meal prep and what do you buy at the grocery store and how do you prepare it? So we're going to have to make some behavioral changes, because it's no longer, I'm just going to run to Costco, I'm going to buy the frozen lasagna, I'm going to throw it in the oven, and I'm going to drink 6 sodas and have some ice cream afterwards. None of that was real food. But instead, if you want the lasagna, let's buy all the ingredients. And that when you are preparing that in your home with love, you realize how labor intensive it is to prepare those things. You start to understand, like, oh, wow, I'm going to savor this meal every bite and kind of be grateful and thankful for what I am putting in my mouth. I'm going to throw out the soda and I'm just going to drink water or maybe a little bit of iced tea. And instead of having some ice cream, I'm going to take my husband for a walk around the block. And we're going to enjoy each other's company and talk about the day and relax and kind of bring down that stress with a different mechanism rather than feeding myself with some ice cream that's maybe, filling an emotional void.
So a big part of this is just slowing down the process, right? I often tell my patients the root of health is consciousness. The more connected you are with what's happening to your body and how, for instance, the foods that you're eating make you feel, the more feedback you get. And when we're dealing with something like appetite, which is a very loud demand in the human body, we have to understand exactly what that's telling us. And we have to, if we want to modify our set point, like Dan was saying, right, we have to have some opposing narrative other than, well, if I eat, my hunger signal will go down, and I don't like that. It stresses me out, right? So we have to balance that with something. And I love what you're saying. That returning consciousness to the process builds its own enjoyment. It's no longer just about the negative or avoiding the pain of hunger, if you will. It's about the positive. It's saying, well, yeah, okay, I'm going to deal with my hunger, but I'm going to give myself something that loves on myself rather than just saying, well, I'm going to have nothing. I'm suffering. This is pure austerity, right? It's like, that's a matter of willpower, and willpower is expendable. Right? Better yet, be aware, be conscious, right? Connect with this idea and go, well, why am I doing this? Right? What is the intention behind this? And then when you have that alternative justification or rationale, then you actually have something competing against that. You go, this is actually going to feel nice. Why don't I move in that direction?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think also, let's give the devil his due here when it comes to food processing companies.
Woo.
They know what they're doing, man. When it comes to how to light up your brain and make you want more, they know what they're doing. They know the right ratios of everything, the mouth feels. They're using, functional brain imaging to just see those reward pathways light up.
This is diabolical, man. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, when you start just cooking your own food, you're not going to be able to hit those same pathways the same way they are. So moving from that processed food over to I'm cooking my own food, you're going to get that huge benefit of, okay, I'm not being drawn in to eat more.
You'll be satiated much sooner.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about what satiation is. And this is something that I'd like to hear your guys' opinions on. But when we eat food, we're trying to scratch an itch. We are trying to become satiated. And what precisely are we trying to scratch? What is that itch? That itch is a itch for nourishment. That is a deep-seated biological impulse to have nutrition. And one of the big oddities of the processed food manufacturing system is, of course, that they want to make the food as cheap as possible and sell as much of it as possible. And so they get into this really intricate, like you were saying, study of trying to figure out how to make us feel like we are satiating ourselves when we're not. Because guess what? Then we buy more food. This is the story of McDonald's, right? And there's this joke that everyone's heard that it's cardboard. It's mostly just cardboard, right? Like, not technically accurate, I'm sure. But the point being, it's not food. Well, what do people mean by that? Yeah, it's got calories, macronutrients. But what is it missing? It's missing micronutrients. And part of the, I think, distinction between the integrative medicine approach or functional medicine approach and the mainstream medicine approach is, again, this nuance, the concept of nuance. And so when we are wanting to eat food, yes, we need the macronutrients, but we also need the micronutrients. And these are much, much more complicated. So when a food processing company says, hey, how do we make a food-like product? What they're going to do is they're going to figure out, okay, well, how do we check the boxes, right? What's on the RDA, the Federal Nutrition Label, right? We're going to make this look good. Throw in some magnesium, throw in some vitamin C, throw in some protein, right? But it's a very reductionist, narrow view on things. They aren't saying, how do we make this a really robust food? There's this idea of minerality, right? If you buy a vegetable, let's say kale, at the farmer's market, your local farmer's market, good people, local farms, not monocultures, right? That kale tastes incredibly different than what you got at the supermarket. And there's all of this nuance about our foods that gets totally blown out the window with our current food culture.
Yep. Yeah, great point. Great point. I mean, I think the other, nuance here, and we've been talking a lot about food and a little bit about exercise, but the other nuance here is that there's other factors, especially within the lifestyle, that matter a lot for weight loss. Stress, these are, we know that, these are huge factors in whether or not somebody's losing weight. Certainly the stress can drive a lot of the psychological need for some of these highly processed foods. But also, the science is pretty clear that people who are sleep deprived are not going to lose weight. And if they do lose, weight, body weight, it's probably going to be lean tissue, muscle mass, rather than fat mass. So, these are kind of like the red flags of weight loss. Like somebody coming in saying they're sleeping 4 hours a night, but they want to lose weight.
Yeah.
You guys, we talked a little bit about that, but do you have other red flags of weight loss, things that come up for you? Mm-hmm. Feel free to expand on my sleep and stress, but if you have other ones too, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, no, it's like you're reading my notes. So one of the things
Stop that, Dan.
it has to be in order. And I did a little study on melatonin, and so melatonin is released from the pineal gland, which is a little gland in the middle of your brain, after 4 hours after the last time you were exposed to light. And this is excluding firelight and moonlight, so artificial light. So 4 hours later, melatonin will be released. When melatonin is released, it goes and it binds in the hypothalamus, which is the center of the brain that controls heat and temperature. It has to bind there first, and then leptin, which is the body's accountant for energy. Leptin can then be released and bound to the hypothalamus as well. So if melatonin never gets there, or it gets there at the wrong time, that leptin signaling doesn't hit the hypothalamus, and the body says, I don't have enough energy. The accountant didn't show up. We need more energy input. And so those hunger cues are even stronger after a poor night's sleep or chronically sleep deprived.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think the other interesting things I've seen on this is what people choose when they're sleep deprived. You put them in front of a buffet, you've got your vegetables, you've got your protein, you've got, your healthy stuff. You've also got that more processed, nutrient poor, calorically dense, foods. People will disproportionately reach for that.
Yeah, because they need that. I need energy right now.
Yeah. Kind of an animal instinct, right? There's a frenzy about it. I think everyone can relate to that. And, Snickers did a whole ad campaign on that concept, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Other things that are kind of roadblocks for weight loss are other forms of inflammation. So it might be that you are eating a real food diet, but you are not eating the foods that are necessary right for you.
Nuance. Yeah.
So it could be like, I don't do well, we get a lot of people, I don't do well on gluten and dairy. So we pull those out of their diet. Still nothing is budging with their weight. Well, guess what? They're eating a lot of stuff that has soy in it because they've, are looking for the gluten-free or the dairy-free. So soy gets thrown into a lot of other foods. And they're just as sensitive to soy as they were to gluten dairy. And there's an association there. Oh, geez, pull that soy out and but it makes it sound quick. But the weight will start coming off because that inflammation is coming off. That, reaction to a food that your body just couldn't handle.
Yeah, that's a great point. Neela, other red flags that you see in clinical practice with weight loss, things that, again, patients aren't necessarily aware are impairing their ability to lose weight.
I often think that chronic fatigue and excess weight go hand in hand. And this goes to Shannon's point, right, about melatonin and sleep, and your point about the quality of these things and stress management. But as you guys have alluded to, there's also this big personalized question mark behind anybody who has chronic fatigue. Right? Why do you have chronic fatigue? And very frequently, it has something to do with a disease process, some inflammation generating process somewhere in the body. And, if someone comes to me and they're saying, hey, I really want to turn my weight around, right? I want to be as trim as I was when I was 25. That's great. I want you to get there. I want your metabolism to be sparky and working and get you there. But there's some things in the way, right? If this person with chronic fatigue starts to really punish themselves and say, well, I'm going to eat, very little diet. I'm going to restrict my calories. I'm going to exercise a lot, right? And in the right circumstance, those things can work, right? For the right person in the right circumstance, that can be a silver bullet. But amazingly, for someone else, it might be poison, right? If someone has chronic fatigue, let's say that they're having imbalance of their endocrine system. Colloquially, this can get called adrenal fatigue, right? But if their adrenal glands are strained and they're not able to produce their hormonal products, it starts this whole nuanced cascade that's unique for everyone. And because of whatever their disease state is, they end up with this endocrine imbalance. And unfortunately, that can get further exacerbated by the quote unquote typical advice for weight loss. And so it's always a red flag for me when someone is ill and they want to lose weight. And I go, okay, that's awesome. I love that. We need to do some prep work. We need to get you feeling good first. We need to solve underlying problems so that you can, yes, engage in your excellent drive. I love that you want to do that. Let's get you there. But hit the pause button for a second. Pump the brakes, right? Let's figure out how we help your biology be excited for that instead of struggle through that. Because that's just a recipe for disappointment, for burnout.
Yeah, I agree. I think anything that's driving that chronic fatigue too, it applies to, because certainly people have various types of toxins, metal toxins, organics, biotoxins. Chronic fatigue is one manifestation, but there's other manifestations there too. And I totally agree. Addressing that root cause is just a huge deal first before we even go down the weight loss avenue. So.
Good. So let's talk a little bit more about this quality of life prescription. Someone comes in, how do you guys approach that? We've talked a lot about the root of the problem, some of the nuance there. How do we get into something that people can walk away with? What's the quality of life prescription?
Well, here's, like you said, it's more complicated than it sounds, but so it's eat real food. Don't eat that food really late because that's going to hamper your ability to sleep. Move and have it be an exercise and a movement that you love. Let's make sure you are sleeping at least 8 hours a night, and that 4 of those hours potentially are before 2 a.m. And what else you got for me down? Oh, I guess another thing I'd like to see in terms of let's try to reset the appetite signal is, if possible, if you're the right individual for this, and it's not everyone, can you do a 24-hour fast? Because what we're going to find after 24 hours is that I'm starving signal, I have to eat every 2 hours, can be pushed way down, and you can be reset again to a proper eating pattern.
Yeah.
That's some ancient medicine.
Yeah. And often you can transition them to time-restricted eating with that too, and do kind of a similar thing, which we're going to talk about certainly in more depth. But that's a great point. I think certainly, ruling out these medical causes, I think, is another big part of it. I like what you said about enjoying their physical activity.
Yeah, that's a huge point.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't just go to the gym because I told you that you had to go to the gym for 30 minutes. No, do something you love that you can't wait to do again tomorrow.
Yeah. And I would first rather with the diet try to control maybe two factors. Like say, okay, let's try to have minimally processed or unprocessed foods. And when I say minimally processed, like again, it goes back to the things you're talking about, cooking for yourself. Okay. Minimally processed, unprocessed foods. And, looking to say hit a protein goal, because we know protein's so important for satiety. Let's start there. A lot of people start there and that's enough, from a nutrition perspective for them. And I've seen people lose, as you guys probably have, 70, 80, 90 pounds just doing that. And then, of course, getting into the other lifestyle factors and making sure that there's nothing off there. Getting enough sleep, movement that you enjoy. And in general, trying to be, not just having your exercise block, but thinking about being active throughout the day. So this concept of movement snacks can fit in here, where you take 5 minutes, you walk outside your office, you walk around the building, you go back, you take the stairs, you park a little farther away. Those things add up to activity.
That's a nice rewiring, Dan. Movement snack. It sounds very positive.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, I want one of those. Yeah, the way we talk to ourselves, the language we use has a lot to do with how we function. Right? If we're phrasing this in a positive fashion, like you were saying, Shannon, go out to this thing you love, go play some tennis. Right? Like you were saying, Dan, park a little further away for a movement snack. It's not like, oh, I'm punishing myself, I have to park further back. It's like, oh, I'm going to have a little movement snack. Make those things positive. I think people underestimate the power that has. And it goes very much back to this idea of consciousness, right? If we are aware, if we are present, if we are proactively really engaged in our choices, we're going, why am I doing this? Because it's a good thing for me. It's a movement snack. I'm not trying to make myself feel crappy. I want to feel good. Oh, this is going to help me get there. Oh, I like that. So it helps people sink their claws into it a little bit better, I think, if you phrase that in a nice way. I love that movement snack. I never heard that before, Dan.
Yeah. I think it was actually in one of the papers I read. I think they actually referred to it as movement snacks. Go up and down the stairs for 5 minutes or something like that, and so.
And it's true, right? You feel better after a snack. After a movement snack, you feel better, right? You go, just do a quick flight of stairs, go outside, do a little quick jog, push yourself on your walk, whatever feels like a bite-sized morsel for where you're at, right? If you're feeling a little run down, a movement snack is not going up and down a flight of stairs. A movement snack might be going outside and listening to the birds.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, make a snack. You don't have to try and cram down an extra meal. Right?
I'm practicing that here because I see Dan do it. I know I do it. When there's a break between patients, we're outside. We're walking around the parking lot. We're checking emails or listening to a podcast. It's just so nice to get out, even if it's a cruddy day. Just getting outside, moving, breathing in some fresh air, kind of shaking off whatever the morning was like. It's awesome. You're right. It's a delicious snack.
Yeah. You get people just doing that from a movement perspective and just say, let's shoot for like 8,000 steps, maybe, or 6,000 steps. They're going to feel a lot better and maybe even then feel better able to do some of this exercise stuff we're talking about. So, a lot of times, as you guys know, it's slow, gradual changes. I'm sure you guys have had, the odd exception to this where somebody's willing to make 50 changes and can do it.
Yeah.
But that's not the norm. The norm is like 2 or 3 changes, maybe.
Yeah, people are busy. Let's not kid ourselves, right? If I want to make a change in my life, I'm trying to schedule that thing in.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, that's a great prescription, guys.
Yeah. I think that's a great place for people to start. And yeah, certainly there's layers of complexity that can be built on that, but that is a great starting point, I think.
Cool. Well, why don't we come back maybe in the future if listeners are into this, if they want us to get deeper into the weeds on these things, let us know. Go to our website, qualityofliferx.com. Come to one of our offices or call us, email us. Let us know your feedback on this topic. And if you guys are really excited about this and want us to get deeper into things, there's a lot of nuance here. Let us know, and we're happy to go a little further.
Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to the Quality of Life Prescription today. We will be parking all of these at qualityofliferx.com for the future. So we look forward to hearing from people and hearing what our patients think.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shannon Bidey Driscoll. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and stay up to date with our latest tips.